right, so after the debate this week, which was in Ohio, Joe Biden has embarked on a train tour of both Ohio and also Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania, one of the most critical swing states in this election, a state, of course, that Donald Trump won very narrowly last time around. Ohio really wasn't supposed to be particularly in play when Trump went up by 8 or 9 points last time around. This was one of the states that it was kind of widely presumed was just going to continue this rightward march. Why? Because it has a disproportionate number of white working class voters. Well, we're getting some new data that shows, and this is, I think, a very undertold story, that even though white working class men in particular still strongly with Trump, he has seen a significant erosion from his 2016 support. You'll recall back in 2016, one of the big stories was that Trump had done particularly well with union members. Well, Josh Kraushaar has some great numbers about how much union members in the state of Ohio have now switched from Trump over to Biden.
Yeah, that's right. So this is, Josh dug into the Fox News poll data that just came out of Ohio. Union households in Ohio now favor Biden by 8 points, 52 to 44. In 2016, Trump carried that same constituency by 13 points, 54 to 41, according to exit polling at the day. A 21-point turnaround from where that is. That's incredibly important here in terms of what we see, which what Josh is pointing to is that shifts and within the white working class coalition, specifically within the union coalition in places like Ohio, and you can presume that this is a trend that will carry us across Michigan, Minnesota, and in other states that are important there. You can actually see that even if Trump continues to win that white working class demographic, that by shrinking his margin within there, he's limiting the margin by which he's going to win the presidential election. That's why I think it's so important.
Yeah, and I think it's also important because it kind of debunks one of the myths of the Trump era that was propagated by a lot of liberals in the Democratic Party who were like, anyone who voted for Trump, like, just forget about him. You're not going to win him back. It's over. Like, especially the white working class. They're just too far gone. Like, just write them off. Forget about it. And yet here, with the little bit of economic populist messaging that Joe Biden has done, it's been a couple of things. It's been like the Buy American piece, and he touted that. He touted that throughout the industrial Midwest. It's the fact, I think, also that he's associated with the GM bailout. He's really made that a part of his brand for years now. But also this framing of Scranton versus Park Avenue. I mean, look, it's kind of weak. None of it is like the overwhelming populist message or program, more importantly, that we would like to see. But at least he has seized on a little bit of that. And you can see how it is ultimately paying dividends here and moving a key group that is disproportionately impactful because of the Electoral College in the industrial Midwest. And that is why Joe Biden is in such a strong position. I mean, the Trump campaign has basically written off Michigan. They are basically sort of writing off Wisconsin. They're hoping to make a last stand in Pennsylvania. There was an idea before that maybe he'd be able to win Minnesota, that was a state that Hillary narrowly won. And maybe if they could gin up support among the white working class even higher than last time around, they might be able to pull it into the column. Biden has continued to have the realignment of the suburbs and especially white suburbanites his way, and has been able to achieve some erosion among what was a core base for Donald Trump. And this is reflected, Nate Silver has a new piece up, new analysis here, in the fact that, look, as the clock ticks down and this 7 to 8 point lead that Joe Biden has held essentially very consistently, like it's been a very stable, steady race, that as the clock ticks down, Trump's chances are really dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. I think now he's at like a 21% chance of winning, which, look, still has a chance.
Look, that's still 1 in 5.
But it gets harder every single day.
That's decent. I mean, it's still, 1 in 5. I'd probably take those odds for a lot of people, and a lot of people would too. It was 1 in 3 last time. It's important to internalize both probabilistic ways in which things can happen and also look at these underlying trends. So we're not saying that this is game over, but all of the data points in a certain direction. And within those mini samplings, which I also think are always the most important ones, it's not even, the national numbers don't matter. It's really what it is you got to look at union household, white working class voters, older voters, vaccine, how people feel about things, how people feel about the economy, how people feel about how the country is going. You can extrapolate, I think, a lot more from those numbers than anything national. So that being said, when you look at those sub-demographics that were so core to Trump, and he seems to not have the lead that he had against Hillary, it's a problem. And I especially think when you look at those union households, that's one of the biggest red flags I've seen so far.
Yeah, and the last thing that I sort of have a thought in my mind, and something I want to think about more and read a little bit more on, but we've been covering there aren't a lot of undecided voters.
Yes.
The largest pool is actually Latinos. Something like 23% of Latinos are undecided. Now, on the one hand, maybe that's good for Trump because he's been doing a little better with Latinos than he did last time around. And last time around, he did a little better with Latinos than Mitt Romney had done the time before him. But if sort of typical voting patterns hold, it's more likely than not that a disproportionate number of those remaining undecided Latinos either don't show up or break for Biden. Like, if you had to bet which way they would break, you would bet that they would ultimately break for Biden. And so if that's your remaining undecided pool, we fixate a lot because the polls were wrong in an anti-Trump direction last time around on like, okay, well, if you added 2 points to these key swing states, would Trump be in a position to pull it off? And the answer is basically yes. He's in range for that kind of a polling error to essentially put him in a very similar position to what he was last time. We never talk about what if they're wrong like 2 points in anti-Biden direction. Like, what if you added 2 points to where Biden is right now? Then you go from, okay, he's winning handily, but not a landslide. It's still kind of a squeaker, to now you're talking about Texas, you're talking about Georgia, you're talking about Arizona and North Carolina, and it suddenly looks like an overwhelming landslide. I think that outcome at this point is just as possible as Trump sort of squeaking out a win.
Yeah, I think that's very right.
All right, we're going to have more Rising for you after this.